But I was saying earlier about egomaniacs. We have to talk about it. Beef in the podcast community.
Yeah.
One of the pod OGs out here at the moment, Joseph Budden.
Joey.
Yeah, man. It's just there's some beef in the JBP.
Yeah. It all transpired initially a couple of weeks ago, or maybe like a month or so ago.
Maybe like a year.
I need you to give me the full breakdown for this one.
Yeah,
no, actually,
precise.
From the moment that
we were
Rory and Mo didn't come on the podcast.
Yeah.
I think that was like what, 5 weeks ago or something
like
that.
6 weeks ago.
Yeah. I think that to a lot of people, that's when the problems started. But knowing how things break down and transpire, it didn't start there, innit? So
to give you a bit more of context and backstory for yourself and our listeners. So Joe Budden, Rory Mal, they got a podcast, Joe Budden podcast with Rory Mal is what it's officially called. So like I'm saying, maybe like 5-6 weeks ago, episode comes out and his guys, Rory and Mal, are not there. And he has 2 replacements, some guy called officially Ice and Ish. If people are aware of Joe Budden from back in the day, Ice is his brother. Obviously Ish is his brother as well, but like Ice has been on podcasts back in the day, someone on Twitter and that if you're on the Twitter space. And he just basically kind of breaks down from his perspective, his narrative of where some of the issues lay at the time.
Yeah.
And for about 4 weeks in a row, I think he had those guys podcasting without Rory.
Even the other ones, yeah.
And then within that time period, people started off slow where they weren't overly sure. But I saw a lot of people that would fall under the Rory hive or the Maul hive slowly start turning and going, oh, you know what? If these guys don't come back, I'm kind of cool with the replacements because they was enjoying their.
I think it was the first 1 or 2 episodes. I think they had Save On in the first one.
Yeah.
And people were like,
"Nah, get the boys back."
Yeah,
it's
get
like,
the
imagine
boys
us
back.
being used to each other and then like so I'm not here and Vans just has someone else and like
for weeks on end and it's like, rah.
Where's Vans?
Yeah.
4 weeks is a long time.
It is a very long
someone
time.
else here and call them the velour pappy. It's not gonna bang. It's
That's
not gonna work.
Ain't gonna work.
So yeah, Vans is right. By about week 2, week 3, picks up steam and people start actually enjoying it. Like, I saw a bit of a shift. Some people were like, if these guys don't come back, we're fine with these because those 2 guys that he has a replacement aren't industry guys.
Yeah.
So they ain't really got a relationship with artists like that where they're not going to
see what they think.
Yeah, they're not as PC and they kind of push back on Joe Budden's perspective a bit more. So yeah, that's what was happening currently. Then the guys come back without being too long-winded. First episode back and they start doing the transparency thing. That was the theme episode. Transparency. But you're watching, you're like, this thing ain't fixed.
So they're still passing it in the air kind of thing.
They're still passing the air. Was it the episode where you spoke about respect or the following one?
I believe it was
It was that one.
It was that one where they kind of hashed it out to the public, and then they came back the following episode,
and that was just shit.
And it was just like I can sense the energy from Mal. Is it Mal or Maul, bruv? Fucking. What is it, bruv?
Mealy Mal.
Mal or Mal, whatever it is, yeah.
Money back
I could just sense like the energy just wasn't there. It wasn't right. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and then they announced at the end of the episode that we're going on a break, we're going on vacation, so there's not gonna be a pod the following week.
Yeah.
So no pod. You're thinking, all right, cool.
So he drops some stuff on Patreon with those other 2 guys.
Yeah, with the other 2 guys.
And that's behind a paywall for, they can be a bit more flagrant on there and they can get paid some extra money.
So for the listeners like myself that just listens to the free element of it, which comes out on a Wednesday, on a Saturday, there was no pod that week. So the following week, I was expecting the Mixie Boys to come back.
Yeah.
But again, no, that is the episode where everything just popped off.
Yeah, but before you go there, just go back a second. So the first episode, the transparency one, and I was talking about respect.
Right.
So Joe Budden says to his friend, he basically asked him, "What do you owe your friend? Do you owe your friends respect?" And Joe can be very like, he do semantics and he doesn't want to get backed into a corner. So he's like,
I don't owe anyone
I don't
anything.
owe anyone respect. No, I asked you, do you owe your friends respect? And he goes, I don't owe anybody respect, innit? And that was there for me where I was like, yeah, something's still off. And he apparently told Mal that the podcast itself was none of his business. So basically he told Rory, take a few episodes off. And that's what caused a rift where they didn't come and record, because there had been some fallouts behind the scenes. His story is that Rory had been offering to fight him, blah, blah, blah. So he's made that decision, told him, but via text. So not a conversation. And then that's when Moles went upset, because like, bro, how can you tell my man, who are you to tell my man to stay at home? And within that, you start realizing who looks at who a certain way. So I am, in my perspective, Joe looks himself as like the big dog, the boss of the thing. And could be right, could be wrong. Is the head honcho owns a podcast, isn't it? But perception from them other guys, even though it's clear who the A mic is, I think they definitely felt it was more of a family thing. And like Moore's response is, how can you tell him that? And that's when he doubled down. I'm like, you know what? It's none of your business. I can tell him that, and you can't talk to me either. And that's what's caused the whole rift from what they come out and told us. So that's mad, innit?
That's crazy.
That's crazy to me, innit? You know, even if there's an element of truth in that, just how it's communicated. And like, as a grown man, if we sit down, because how they've always presented themselves to us.
Sorry to jump in. So did he say this, or did what he tell us this happened, or did Mal?
They told us on air. Mal told us on air that this happened, innit?
Okay.
But the conversation with Rory and Joe was via text. So that for me is already red flag.
So them two are talking about their conversation, and all right, cool.
So this is all on air, innit?
All right,
they're all saying it. Mal is saying
I'm with you.
the word respect 800 times on that episode.
Oh yeah. R-E-S-P-E-C-T.
Like, bro,
like
so. Obviously, to him, that means a lot, innit?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, as friends, like, respect should be...
It's a given.
It's a given, and it should be mutual.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, giving man respect, you should expect the same thing, innit? So, when Ma was saying that, and Budden is like, I don't owe anyone respect. Even from saying that, yeah, I'm going to look at you for Fugazi. Like, I'm going to look at you sideways from knowing that, bruh, that's your perspective, yeah? All right, cool. I see you now. Like, even when I'm telling you that I didn't respect the way you spoke to me, and this is your rebuttal. How are we going to fix that if you're not looking to look into yourself a little bit and just see where you may have gone wrong? From holding yourself accountable from that level, at least you owe me that.
Yeah, and even if you are the boss, you've got to make this a comfortable working environment. For me, that's how I view things, isn't it? Especially because the presentation to us has been like, these are 3, 4, 5 friends, but 3 friends on camera, basically with all the production crew, and that's what's made it work. Just vibing together.
Yeah,
These are Joe's guys. This is Miles' guy, this is Rory's guy, and we get to an insight into their life, their relationships. Joe's always very transparent with how things are in his life. He kind of overindulges to a certain degree. More can be a little bit more aloof, and then you get the music takes and blah, 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 and all the cultural references and stuff. And then Joe will be on bigger shows like Your Love and Hip Hop, so that bleeds over into the podcast. So there's always a lot of stuff to talk about, innit? But I felt that he looks at them as less than, because he feels he brings a lot more. And I think that's more his passion at the moment, innit? Like, he's definitely the one that's driving the ship in regards to that, innit? But with that comes more responsibility. So like, so everyone's got a different perspective of how things have panned out. So we fast forward a little bit to what Vans was talking about. We have the episode where now he comes out and we get more information why the guys aren't here. But how he's presenting is that, they're letting the side down. They refuse to come to work, you know? And even small little things that people sometimes don't pick on what Joe Budden says, where he tries to, like I say, control the narrative. So he says to the room, how do you guys feel? How does the audience feel that, these guys are letting the side down, kind of thing? So it makes you as a listener and you as a production crew look at them differently. But according to the guys, Rory and Mal, that was never the case. You knew we weren't going to be there because you told Donnie not to come to work.
Yeah.
We're having issues.
We've had issues, and they tried to do the transparent thing and have that open conversation on air. But even with them having that conversation, and although like Joe didn't say much in that episode,
he said enough.
Yeah, he said enough.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? But like, from a perspective of like listening to that, to the format of a Joe Budden podcast episode, he's talking for the majority of the episode. Like, so he allowed them to kind of get their shit off and say how they felt, and then, you know, things continued as normal. But you could just sense like that it wasn't the same kind of chemistry.
Man, you told me to my face this podcast on my business, and he's telling me like, brother, how can you talk to me like that? Innit?
Yeah.
So, that's where I was like, so cool, that happened. It's gone left. They've had next episode, but that was there. They take the break. Obviously, Joe comes back. We get more feedback in regards to how he's feeling, and then we go. I think it's another week or week after, where then he's on air and fires Rory.
So this is the episode after the break.
Yeah, after the vacation, innit?
Yeah.
So we know they're going on vacation, so we have the episodes behind the paywall on Patreon with the two replacements, Ish and Ice, and you're expecting to see the boys back on the Wednesday usual schedule, and Donnie just goes crazy,
absolutely crazy.
All right,
I think
so. This is a good place to start because like we're all grown and we can have proper chats, innit?
Yeah.
So he's on there. So backstory: Maul is Biggs Rockefeller and hip hop's little brother, but he's been very close to Joe Budden from back. So you can look at old episodes of Love and Hip Hop where Rocky Thunder and Tahiri are fighting, and Maul sat there. Like, he's been his dog from back in the day, innit? So it's not a secret. There was points in his life he lived with Joe, innit? So as a way to kick his back in, Donnie was bringing that up on the episode.
And the thing is that when they were getting along,
who's Joe?
Joe Budden.
Yeah.
Joe Budden.
So like, it's crazy to me because when they were getting along, it was like, yo, like, you know, we lived together, we're, you know,
we're day one homies. We've been jailed together.
Smashing things together, like we've been jailed together. And then on this particular episode, it was like, nah, he lived with me.
And it was very, he was very making it very clear that no, like almost like your home.
So he made it seem as though like Donnie was just a bum and sleeping on his couch. That's how it sounded.
Stealing detergent and putting in his room. That's what he said.
That's what he said. That's what he said.
He said it was that Don that would like buy his own snacks and put in his room. Buy detergent.
I can't feel that, man.
Yeah.
I
like,
can't feel that.
It'll be like me and you falling out, like
I can't.
And you air all my dirty laundry.
And then I'm there saying that, oh yeah, nah, H lived with me. Like, man used to take stuff into his bedroom and keep it there.
Man's hiding all the do-rags in his bedroom.
Bro, like, do you know what? Yeah, and you know, once the smoke is cleared and stuff, yeah, like actually listening to Joe discussing the dealings of the business, this is where like opinions like differ in it with people that were listening to it. There's so many different opinions. Like, well, Joe is well within his rights because blah blah blah. They don't deserve equity. Like, you know, they don't put money into it. They just show up and record and then they go home. Everything else is organized and executed by Joe Budden. So, what do they essentially deserve? This is, you know, some of the questions that are being asked. For me personally, have that gripes towards the network, not the podcast, because how they've heavily contributed to the success of the podcast is second to none to me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a team effort. There's a lot of people that would say that Rory was carrying the podcast for quite a bit.
The last 2 summers he's carried the podcast.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so they're not there as invisible figures that are just there to make up the number. They are contributing to the podcast and people listen to it because of them as a trio.
Yeah, as a trio, yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
hell yeah, like, come on, man. We built this shit to, like, we are part of the success story.
But then when it comes to now splitting stuff, everyone does, you are going to have to place a value on what everyone brings, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't honestly feel like any out of the 2 guys that contribute, I don't think either of them are mad that Joe gets more, because when they had a response podcast,
They're not mad. That's not what they're mad
I'm with
for.
that as well. Joe does deserve more, you know, but because even what he tried to, so
It's called the Joe Budden podcast. Of course, he's
he tried
gonna
to
get more.
position more as some bum that was living at his house. He tried to position Rory as just some guy that like turned up at episode 20. But the problem with Joe Budden is, like, again, egomaniac in my opinion. Donnie forgets, like, when you've told us the truth. Rory was there from day one with the podcast, like the early days. Like, He was there when they had Marissa Mendez on the podcast. Look, this is the problem as well because of how big Joe's got. A lot of people have started listening to the podcast, watching the podcast off the back of Everyday Struggle and watching him argue with academics. So now that you get the new fan base, innit? But if you've been there from the beginning, you know Rory's been there from the beginning. You know, so and then there is something to be said about sweat equity. Just put in the time, the hours, innit? You know, yes, to some people, you just show up and record, but you still got to think about what you got to say. There was a time period when Joe's perception in public wasn't that great. So the people that were getting guests were Rory and Mal. Like they're the industry, they're the guys that have links, innit? They can get people on. They had better relationships with people, innit? You know, Joe's public face wasn't that great. It's got better as big as he's got with the podcast.
Yeah.
But it was those guys that were able to get the guests on early doors, innit? And there was value in having them there because he wanted Rory on and he approached Maul because like he needed, Maul added the cool factor at the early part.
Yeah.
Because don't get it twisted, he might not like this. Joe kind of appeals to the Knicks a little bit. That's just my personal opinion. But like the guy in the barbershop wearing the NY fitted with the Timberlands is a bit more Maul's flavour.
Yeah.
He added that in it.
Especially from an American standpoint.
And a street element a little bit as well. Like
from an American standpoint, 100%.
And just a legitimacy, like, oh, that's my man's little brother. Biggs is a brother from Rockefeller. So it just legitimizes what we're doing here a little bit, you know. And they were able to then realize we can just be the podcast for the man them and not have to worry about having a woman on there. Because he used to do the whole like battle of the sexes thing with Marissa Mendez, who was on Hot 97. We've been long-winded again. So we then fast forward. Donnie has the outburst on the episode, fires Rory on air, and I think to contribute to what Vans is saying, it's like you're showing how you like deal with people, like,
bro, like this person to the right of me, yeah, I consider him a brother, innit?
Come on,
yeah, and I'm not gonna tell him that I love him, yeah, and then we fall out. I think I'm the boss of this thing, and then I'm pointing to him when he's not even there.
Oh, that's great. You should see the visuals.
Bro, seeing the visuals,
no one's there.
He's looking saying, at man.
You are fired. You are in breach of your contract and no one's there.
From this point on forward, you are fired.
I just showed visuals.
Don't come back here, basically.
Afion Crockett's got hilarious parody. This whole thing is way funnier than it should be. And apologies to our regulators who may not overly care about this, but it's something we had to talk about because like we've got an episode where I was talking about Joe Budden versus Charlamagne, and I called it. I said everyone was like kind of horny, beating off their meat. Like, yeah, Joe's killing Charlamagne. Spotify, the rant. When you now look, those guys didn't even know what was in the contract. They weren't even involved in the negotiations. Yeah. So even though we support them, it does kind of show how within their little clique, who's viewed as who, innit? Because even though it's a trio, when it comes out to the business dealings, only one person with their representative is kind of involved in like the nitty gritty.
And one thing that I hate what people say is like, oh yeah, business is business. For me, that only applies to the arsehole who is, going off Joe's ethos. Okay. Do you know what I'm saying? Like mistreating people. It's all individual based.
Do you know what? Based off what you man are saying to me, there's a couple.
A lot to take in, innit?
There's a lot of taking, but there's a lot of things that I'm hearing, and a lot of conflicting ideas that some I agree with, some I don't. I think the first thing to address, or that I would have addressed, is the relationships that are on the table. Do you see what I'm saying? If you have a business relationship with someone and it's a personal one at that, this transparency thing that man are talking about, that should have been done from a very long time ago. Number one. So like a lot of it is just blurred lines in terms of communication. Exactly that. No one knows where they stand, and like Joe would sit there and say, oh yeah, me and Ian don't have contracts. Ian is his manager, innit? Yeah. But then at the same time, it's like you've been crying for 2 months straight about how you're being dealt with by Spotify when things in your backyard aren't even done correctly. Poor leadership. And it just it's what's upsetting me about this is not upsetting me, I'm not actually upset, but you know what I don't is the idea that these men are supposed to be as close as they are, and then to turn and say, nah, my man was living with me, XYZ, blah 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 blah. Even if that was the case, it's irrelevant. And if that guy was ever your dog, that should have never come out. Yeah,
he's moving like them Love and Hip Hop babe.
You understand? So for me, I'm hearing it, I'm like, bro, true or false, You don't need to drag his name through the mud for you to get whatever point you're trying to get to get across.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? On top of that, that has nothing to do with any of the business dealings.
Yeah.
Do you get me?
He was upset at the fact that they were asking him about the numbers. Like, we need to see what's going on here. Like, you know, they want to see like what percentage, what the numbers are, so that they can make sure that their percentage and what they agreed on was coming to them in a correct way.
Okay, so they're profit partners. So the talk was that like, basically they were employees, but according to them, because they done a response podcast, is that
Called them overpaid as well.
Yeah, he said he overpaid them. So they're profit partners. So everyone has a percentage of what comes in. But what was happening was Joe was just giving them money, and they weren't able to actually. So they've admitted that even though they lied in the moment for the sake of the podcast and to look better than brilliant idiots, and I'm here, I'm being petty. I knew at the time it was all cap. That equity. We knew we're separated from Spotify. Blah blah blah. They didn't even have a say in that. They didn't have a say in the new Patreon and Cash App situations. They've been asking for like 2 years plus now for accounting. Like, how do I know what you're giving me is correct? You could be giving me 50 bags when really off the percentage I should be getting 150.
And you see, that's why I said it's a bit conflicting, because there is an aspect of it where gets a bit seedy in the sense of the reality is this whole asking business, their shit should be on point regardless. Do you get me? There should be no point where you're asking another man in which you're supposed to be doing something with the same level or what's going on if you have your own deans that you haven't taken care of, innit? Do you get me? You should be taking care of what you need to take care of.
Clean your face, innit? Take care of
you understand? But at the same time, I know that would have come from the expectation based off their actual relationship.
Yeah, they said they trusted him as a friend, but there's something to be said as well, that if you've seen someone deal with other people bad, why do you feel just because you're that person's friend it can't happen to you? Because one thing I do like is in everyone's transparency on both sides, you can pick holes and how they've all moved, innit? It's not just Joe's at fault fully.
Absolutely.
There's some accountability on there, innit? Because Moore was honest, and I liked it. He said that Joe's had this thing that he's done it. He's burnt bridges when it comes to corporations, but Moore's always been like, fuck it, they owe us anyway. What's the Jay-Z bar? I'm overcharging niggas for what they did to the Cold Crush. So you bump people back in the day. Now when I get in position, I'm getting you back for what you've done to people that look like me. And it's cool when it's corporations, but early part of the podcast, Peter Rosenberg helped him find studios and they fall out. You get rid of Marissa Mendez. You've dealt with people bad, but for us, we was always cool. But now it's happening to you.
Until we start there.
We should care more because the women online, because of like the history of it all goes full circle of Joe's like domestic abuse allegations and that. They're like, it's interesting seeing this whole chatter and uproar about how he's treated two men when allegations are over the years he's dealt with women wicked. You know, and it's just a moment for them to be like, look, mark it down. It's kind of interesting, like seeing how he treated two grown men. And now we all suddenly care because the people can act like they don't know, but the allegation's been out there for years. Not just. I feel
like it was a thing, so I don't feel like it's like a sudden. Oh, now it's. It's definitely a thing because it definitely impacted him. In a lot of things, but I just find it's just a very sloppy situation.
And for me personally, I was like, all right, cool, man. I've known of Joe Budden since 02, 03. Playing Def Jam Vendetta here and Pump It Up in the back. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he's been around that long, but he hasn't been a successful rapper. So he's the most successful that he's ever been.
Oh, come on now.
What are you saying?
I'm trying to sneak in.
Wait, don't do that. Man try to sneak in with retro fours on, baby blue I can't believe you.
So in my mind, like, I'm thinking,